Welcome, everybody, to this live recording of an Afikra Conversation podcast. Our special guest is Ahmed Al-Refaie, otherwise known as OwaikeO, who is an illustrator and graphic designer from Kuwait. Throughout his career, Ahmed's fascination with the past grew year after year, and he has become focused on the Middle Eastern cultures and traditions, brought in a vibrant and modern style. His work has grown from a personal hobby to a business where he collaborates closely with clients from local and international businesses in creating illustrations for brands. Ahmed, welcome to Afikra Conversations.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here, and thank you for the amazing introduction. And thank you for all the team at Afikra.
Of course, thanks so much. So let's start with a basic question. You are based in Kuwait, and you're calling us from Kuwait right now.
Yes, that is correct.
So do you feel like you are making quote unquote Kuwaiti art?
My passion for Kuwaiti art has expanded further. The subject that I cover today are mostly, I would say, Middle Eastern / Arabic. And there is a reason for that. There is so much you can, reference from the past or the subjects that I cover in terms of what we have in Kuwait and how much I can have my own spin on it. But slowly I started to expand further. And I found like there are so many things that are found in different countries around the Arab world that are very connected. So we'd have these, folk tales, for instance, and they share similar stories. Like anything else in the world, things travel from one place to another. And I didn't want to confine what I do with just Kuwait. However, there's plenty to cover from Kuwait as well as other countries. So this is where I'm at right now.
Where did you study? How did you how did you get the skills that you clearly have now? Give us a little backstory on that. I know a little bit about the fact that you were an English major or literature major, but give us some background.
Oh yeah, so coming from an English major, I understand this does not really translate to what I'm doing today. But if we rewind many years back, when I was a child, I would watch Western cartoons, the likes of Cartoon Network, Disney channels, and stuff like that. And I was always fascinated by what I see and what I wanted to create rather than just consume. I believe I was around 10 or 11 years old. So I would buy these, well, my mom would buy me coloring books. And instead of actually coloring them, I would take papers, put them on top of the pages and try to trace. And this is the sort of thing that really got me into drawing and training myself to know how to draw. Of course, I wasn't planning on doing any of that. I just wanted to draw and impress my parents. Here, look at me, I'm drawing things. Fast forward till I was 16 or so. I kept doing that as well as trying to draw different characters from what I see on TV, of course. Then I started to learn graphic design. I would download, applications like Photoshop, Illustrator, and try to test them out. I've never had any academic studies in any of these subjects, but I've always been passionate and determined to learn. And the method that I learned from is basically by making mistakes. I make mistakes on a daily, whether it was personal project or a client's project. I make a mistake, I correct it, and it's funny, but I do appreciate it when I come across a mistake because this is a time when I actually learn. So the same method I took on when I was a child, I still do the same way. Now onto the English literature major. While back then you'd think illustration isn't something you would want to, or you can make a living basically out of it, especially in the region. This is slowly starting to change, of course. But during the time I had to take something, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in English literature. Not a subject I'm particularly interested in. However, I think a lot of it has to do with what I do today in terms of the fact that I like to tell stories through my art. And as you know, with literature, you read a lot of novels, you read a lot of stories, and you gotta get a few hints from there and there how to build a character. And that sort of thing is probably helping me a lot in what I do today.
I want to talk about Cartoon Network for a second. I think we're roughly the same age. What were some of your favorite shows, your Cartoon Network shows? I feel like there's a lot of Dexter's Laboratory in your work.
Definitely a favorite. Yeah. Um, I did watch a couple of cartoons. You know, back then we didn't know what is culturally appropriate to watch or not.
Yeah.
But let's say there was this cow. I can't remember the name of the show. Um, I don't know if Rugrats was on Cartoon Network or not.
Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah.
These kind of shows, it's a mixed sort of styles, but Cartoon Network is entirely, and the style that they bring is just, they take something that is there, but they turn it into something completely different. Like
Yeah.
Dexter's Laboratory is amazing, in my opinion. And for the fact it still runs today. So that's saying something.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the influences that I thought you would say that you didn't mention was Japanese cartoons, right? So anyone who grew up in the Arab world in the 80s and 90s grew up around Captain Majid and other like co-opted Japanese cartoons that were cheaper for Arab syndicators to overdub than the American counterparts. So all of a sudden we had, you know, Grandizer and stuff like that were staples. But there's for me, when I look at your work, there's such an influence from early computer game culture and sort of Japanese cartoons. Am I wrong about that?
Not at all, not at all. For a fact, anime is you know, the best forms of you know, cartoons that I watched over the years, and they still continue to develop their styles, where a few channels keep on, or a few production houses just keep on doing pretty much the same thing. They continue to advance, and of course, all the shows that you mentioned, I have watched, and I think everyone in our world has grown with these. But when it comes to trying to illustrate something that I can call my own as a style, I try to stay away from creating something that looks anime-like. I want to do something completely different. So this is, and as for computers, definitely like the earliest computer I've dabbled with basically was, I think it was my brother's computer, and it was, we call it Sakhar, or it was called the MSX game console. So basically it's a computer, you had a keyboard and you had a game cartridge that you place inside the keyboard. It's kind of interesting. And you play kind of like DOS games you find on an old computer. I'm not sure what kind of age range we're dealing here in terms of the audience today, but it's something else.
That's cool. Okay. At the jump, I asked you about feeling like you're making Kuwaiti art, right? And this next piece I brought up for the people who can't see the screen. I forget the name, but there's something called like Ministry something.
Octopus.
Ministry Octopus. And this type of project I feel like is like deeply local.
Yes.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about this project, how you approach it, and is this different than, are these types of sort of social commentary projects coming from a different part of your brain?
A lot of what I illustrate is basically a personal experience. So it's something I saw, heard, or most likely I have experienced it myself. This is more so Kuwait and similar countries, I would say. So when I approach a very sensitive topic like this, I try to create something that works from a visual standpoint. So it's not political in a sense. It's not confined with a certain time frame. Like in 2 years' time, this is not relevant anymore. I think I illustrated this 2 or 3 years back, and if I look at it today, still works. Still is something I would relate to. What is basically from a visual standpoint, at least they can live on further. But I hopefully, from what I intend and mean by this, it would change. So just a background. Almost all government-related documents or papers, anything like this in Kuwait has to be done in person. And it's never easy. It's never clear, and it's never either clear for us as people who go there or people that work there. So you'd ask someone, they don't know what's supposed to be done. You go there, they point you somewhere else. Hence why I'm going with this sort of person where everything, if you go to him, basically, he represents that entity, and he would point you to go there and there. And it's a spiral. Like I would go to one building, they tell me to go to the other building, and you go to the other building, the guy over there is not even at work today. He's on vacation. Or in some cases, he's actually having breakfast. So I'd have to wait. This is the sort of thing I wanted to point out in a funny way, but hopefully spark some change.
Okay. On your website, for those anyone who goes to your website, there's these two courses that you can take, and both of them are crucially in Arabic.
Yes.
And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the dearth of educational content about illustration that is actually like contemporary and of the moment, that's in Arabic. How much content is out there for a young designer who who's 12 years old, who speaks Arabic only, that wants to learn? How much content's out there?
So if we're talking about Arabic purely and no understanding of English, that person might have trouble trying to learn. But that should not be a discouragement for anyone trying to learn, because if they don't have basically the payments to make in order to subscribe to different channels that offer, like for myself, like when I offer a few courses in Arabic, tools have become so easy in terms of what we had back then. And if you look at something, I mean, you could watch a foreign movie with no subtitles and just look at a Japanese movie, you'd understand and you can make up what's happening, even though they're verbally communicating. But in art, you can see them pushing a button and they're doing this and doing that. So it's much more easy and visual for them to understand. The content that is Arabic today, and if we say the YouTube sort of space, is lacking in terms of teaching art in that manner. You will find some courses online in terms of like the ones I'm providing, but these are paid. There are, I think, plenty of small tidbit tutorials that you can find either on TikTok or Instagram. But I think these are more targeted to the younger generation. Like I'm starting to feel the same way, where I have a attention span that doesn't go beyond 1 minute. So I'd watch a video for 1 minute and that's it. So, and if you learn by trial and error, this is something that is okay and it's fine. And going back to the first point I said, just the tools are so easy today.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been drawing on an iPad, and you just have a couple of tools here and there, and you can craft whatever you want. So it's an interesting time right now, and it shouldn't be a discouragement for people to learn, whether they go with paid content or just access everything free online.
Yeah. I sort of want to get a sense of, from your perspective, a lot of the illustrators that we've had on the series have some connection to Beirut, one way. Either they grew up here, or they went to AUB and were part of the graphic design department, or some connection, or AUC in Cairo. Do you feel like there is an emerging or emerged style that is of Kuwait that you can identify? You can look and say, oh yeah, this is very much a sort of a Kuwaiti graphic style that is different necessarily than the work that's coming out of like Sharjah or coming out of Qatar or Baghdad or wherever?
No, and I wish that wasn't the case. Of course, you can look at traditional art and you'd see sort of similarities between one's artwork. Perhaps it's the tools or the subjects that they draw, but I wouldn't say this is what captures what Kuwait is all about. We have amazing calligraphy artists, but at the same time, I'm thinking beyond that, like what you've said, Beirut has a distinctive art scene. Same goes to Cairo, and Amman as well in Jordan. These places are very known for artistic scenes, and whether you can pinpoint the art styles or not is debatable for a few people. But you know, this is a place where art comes from. I don't see it that way in terms of Kuwait, but there's a growing art scene, I would say, but more into photography rather than digital art, in my opinion. We have a lot of great photographers. They're very well known, and they get commissioned all across the Middle East to, take pictures of different businesses, brands, and such. So I think in the photography scene, this is where you can say this is sort of taken in Kuwait, but not digital art.
It's funny because I do think my sister lived in Kuwait for 10 years or so, and I've spent a fair amount of time there, and we have a bunch of friends who are based there. I do think that like branding in Kuwait is almost like about as good as anywhere in the region. And
I see.
Do you agree or not?
Not branding, because a lot of these brands are not developed in Kuwait.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I can pinpoint each brand, and I can tell you where they design their logos and brands. They are good designers, yes.
So maybe they're just great branding budgets.
It's a great branding budget, but the companies are going for, by the way, mostly Mexican companies. Out of all places, you would never imagine there are Mexican companies, but there are like 4 prominent Mexican companies in Mexico City that are so good. And whenever they publish something, you'd see them on the front page of Behance, which is basically, for those that don't know, it's a top place to publish your work in terms of branding. So yeah, a lot of them go there. We do have some great talents in the branding scene. My answer earlier was more targeted towards digital art in that sense, character design, but branding, yes. There had been a wave where a couple of years back, the what do you call it? The specialty coffee brands started popping out like crazy.
Every 10 feet there was another coffee
yes brand. Like this spiraled all across into the region later on. So we are known for the F&B market, not so much so the branding of the F&B market, but they come up with really great concepts. A lot of them have opened and branched over to Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, as well as Saudi. They're really great brands, and they're built on the international basis. So that's why they're able to expand.
Okay, so I just want to zoom in on it for a second. So are you telling me that there are 4 branding companies in Mexico City that are helping shape the visual branding identity of the Kuwaiti F&B market, which is then also going to shape the visual branding guidelines of the broader coffee culture?
Well, if you think about it, if you look at a culture and how they dress, and that we wear the formal dishdasha in Kuwait, which is, I don't know how to explain this in English, but it's just one long shirt that extends all the way to the ground. I mean, you've seen ours. Oh yeah, there we go. That's a perfect slide here. The fabric is not made in Kuwait, and it's not stitched by Kuwaitis either. So yet you say, and we look at it as a Kuwaiti sort of look. So this is what I'm trying to convey in terms of the branding. Yes, there are amazing brands built by Kuwaitis as well as designed by Kuwaitis, but some of them are designed or outsourced, and that's okay. I think a lot of, if you go to a restaurant, chances are that the people are cooking are from different places. Now, the brands you're actually showcasing right now on screen, I know if you're just listening to this, basically these are brands that myself and my partner have built in our studio called Studio IO. And this is what we do. We do brands, we do logos, packaging, and such. And we've always had this sort of international appeal in terms of how we approach every project. We only make them localized if we feel the concept has to do with something local. Otherwise,
Sure.
we want the business to expand further on with the client.
Cool. Ahmed, you know what your target should be, right?
Yes.
Your target should be Mexico City. Okay.
We have this covered ourselves. That's fine for now.
That's so funny. Okay, so I would be remiss if I did not ask you about the 3 letters that that people either love to talk about or hate talking about, which is NFT.
I debate that with myself as well.
Yeah, it is people have a schizophrenic relationship with those 3 letters. But you've created an NFT.
Yes.
I think you've only created one called the Retired Arab.
Yeah.
So walk us through. Let me ask you just a basic question. Okay. Ahmed, what is different about creating an NFT as a digital artist versus a different type of piece? How is your approach different?
So they're entirely different. When creating the project for NFT, you have to keep a few factors into mind. I haven't reached the level of success in terms of this project, in terms of sales yet. It's still a work in progress. However, let me break it down for people to understand and how I understood what an NFT is basically, and why people love it or hate it. I mean, if you make money out of it, you're gonna love it, of course. But if you don't, you're gonna hate it. It's a highly competitive market, and people are racing to create anything. And as a result, you're gonna see a lot of, how do I put this in the cleanest way possible, work that is not that great. And the reason being, they just want to race into this game. They see something sell. And funny enough, you see a lot of things sell that when you look at it from an artist's standpoint, you don't think this would ever sell. You don't understand. There are collections that are basically scribbles by someone who is well known, and they just sell for crazy, like millions per NFT. So think of it like if you travel to a country and you go to their local market, the traditional market that has been here for 200, 300 years. They always tell you that, they have similar products. There's a lot of scams going on, but there's this one good shop. If you buy it, he's an honest buyer, that sort of thing. This is what I see from the NFT market. There's a couple of few vendors that are true artists. They create something really nice, and there's a lot of loud noise around them. There's a huge marketing around NFTs, making them more than what they are, in terms of they want to, push you into loving what they create in order for you to buy it and therefore put value in what they do. So essentially, what an NFT is basically, it's an art form. It's an image or a video or whatever sort of picture you can also turn your face into a selfie if you wanted to. An NFT, sorry, a selfie you can turn into an NFT. You upload it online, people get interested in it, they buy it, but they don't buy it for the art itself. They buy it in order to resell it. And this is where the money making happens. So basically, if you create great art, people look at it, they might not buy it. But if the person who is behind this NFT is, let's just say, a well-known actor or a musician, people are going to buy it because they know whenever he or she talks about their NFTs, it drives the value of that NFT forward. So if I buy an NFT for, let's say, $1, tomorrow I'll sell it for someone else for $2, and that $2 will sell it for $3 and $4. And the original maker of that NFT gets 10% of each sale. Today, we have NFTs that have exceeded the $500,000 mark per NFT in a collection consisting of 10,000 NFTs. So it's really crazy. So as an artist, it's a great way of really getting people to appreciate what you do. But at the same time, it has become a toxic environment where people tend to create for the sake of selling rather than creating because they love that passion or they have passion for creating.
Yeah.
And we see so many duplicate and scam projects, sadly, in the space. And one thing you would notice, you'd always see duplicate characters. You'd see a face of a character and it keeps changing. And this is where auto-generation comes into place. People auto-generate their characters. They create like 50 of them. They click a few buttons and you have 10,000 of these. And this is, for an artist, this is where it really hurts because you're basically not really creating art. You're having someone do the work for you. And, you know, I go back a couple of years back, people where I come from think that if you draw something on a computer, then the computer is drawing it. More and more so, this is happening now as people are just going through these. I know I've kind of branched off.
No, but I do want to ask a question about the process of it. So this screenshot that I have on the screen, or this image that I took off your website, is an image of the retired Arab NFT that you created.
Yes.
If I wanted to purchase that, how do I actually purchase the NFT? And what is the difference between how you went into this? Like when you designed this retired Arab, what is the difference actually, like operationally, between just creating the JPEG and putting on your website and creating the NFT that I can then go buy and is non-fungible in a way that is different than this image that I'm looking at right now, which is completely fungible? I just took it and put it in this presentation. So walk me through the difference between the two things.
Yeah, really great point. There's always this sort of thing, what happens if I save an image and put it on my desktop? Nothing happens. It's basically the same thing. However, when you upload into an NFT marketplace, you know, kind of like when you go into if you go on an apparel shop online or go to an antique shop or a furniture shop, there are different platforms for everything. So there are dedicated platforms for selling NFTs. And when you upload your NFT or put it on the platform, it creates a smart contract. And what it is essentially is, think of it like a lines of code that binds this sort of image to me. Okay, but even the me in this equation is not really Ahmed as a person. It's my wallet where the money would go eventually to. And so if someone then buys it from me, it would show that the transaction basically went from this address that is mine to this person's address. And it keeps going and selling further and further. So when you go about creating an NFT collection, chances are you might go with something that people can show off later on. So something, if you think of a really nice scenery like a waterfall, it wouldn't sell because what can I do with that, basically? When you go in a character, people like to basically show off that character. You're going to see a lot of images on Twitter. You'd see this hexagon instead of a circle for their avatars. It means it's a verified NFT. Instagram is eventually going to be implementing the sale of NFTs as well as having the profile pictures as NFTs. So when I approach this, I create characters that share similar features. So when you take each one out, you'd still know this is the retired Arab. Yeah, they share the same pose, but not necessarily all the features, because I have one that looks like a dragon, for instance, one with a VR, one looks like a galaxy. It's a fun process as an artist. Like I might have approached this with a negative matter initially, but as an artist for myself, when creating this is a lot of fun because you're essentially creating like different puppets with different designs, and you get to explore things you wouldn't normally do on a normal project. And quantity is really an important thing for artists, because if you have like 5 NFTs, people are not going to be interested. People are not going to know about it. But if 1,000 people, 2,000, 3,000 people own one of your NFTs and they start talking about it, this is where you get the marketing.
Yeah. So they're basically like, you're trying to create like Pokemon cards, essentially.
Yes. Yes. That's a great way of doing, explaining it.
Okay, I want to talk about stuff that has no commercial value, which is a lot of your self-initiated projects, quote unquote, self-initiated projects, which are almost all sort of related to like heritage and culture. Walk me through some of them, and what are they, why you went through the process of creating them, and what your hopes are for each of the projects.
Yeah. So if I rewind a little bit to around 2016, this is where I started to, basically scrap everything and start over. Everything you're seeing today has been created since 2016 and upwards. I still create, obviously, on a daily basis. So prior to that, I had sort of no soul in terms of what I create in art. I'd do anything. I didn't have a theme. Not to say that you need to be confined in a theme of some sort, but it felt like there's no identity. Like, of course, we are so inspired by different cultures, especially Western culture. I mean, we watch their movies, we watch the shows and the cartoons, like you've mentioned earlier. The anime is Japanese, the Cartoon Networks are Western, media, basically. So when you see all of this every day and you start to forget what is happening around you and what makes you what you are. And I wanted to explore that. Little that we know about our ancestors or people beforehand. As you know, culture and tradition is a very prominent thing here, and people like to follow them. And when you're as a child and your approach to that mentality, you would feel kind of sort of distant, because you're forced into something. Let me understand, why are we doing this? Why are we pouring coffee the same way, for hundreds of years? Or why are we doing this? There's no explanation for that. So it started off for, I don't understand what's happening, to let me understand it through art. And along the way, hopefully people get engaged. Normally, when you look at history, look at the past traditions, it's old and it's boring. But my vision on that is, it's a classic car. It's an amazing classic car. And that's what I want to showcase with my art. So little that we see of any modern interpretations of anything that has to do with Arabs, the Muslim religion as well. I mean, you only see what the media wants you to see. Frankly, this is not the reality in a lot of places. But for instance, if we look at this, what is showcased on screen, it's called the Greats. For a time, Muslims were leaders in chemistry, mathematics, astronomy, and a lot of things. And we kept hearing about these things. I mean, if we studied mathematics in school, and the book was called Al-Jabra. Al-Jabra is the English name for Al-Jabr. So I started kind of remembering these things that we were told, and even the English numbers today are actually the Arabic numbers. So I went back to what is called the Golden Age, and this happened in Baghdad. A lot of people would come to Baghdad because it was the sort of hub for everything scientific, everything that is revolutionary, and a lot of the medical studies there as well had traveled across the world. This illustration in particular is the first woman to basically, she helped build the first university in the world. Now, don't quote me on this because it is not known for certain, but it is certain that is a woman who has done that, and one of the earliest universities, if not the first one. So it is very interesting for me in a world where we feel, or sometimes women's rights are not equivalent to that of men's, that we have had this sort of freedom where women are taking on prominent roles and doing a great thing for the culture and their countries. So it's a very interesting journey for me that I get to illustrate these things. Yeah. They're very self-initiated. They don't make me money, but I have fun making them.
I want to counteract that one with this, because the greats, is all about these positive imagery.
Yes.
And please, for those who can't see the screen, please describe what we're looking at here and how this might be a funny counterpoint.
Yeah. So my approach to everything that I do has to be positive. If I'm talking about something that is an idea I want to push through, something I don't like as well. And I like to approach things in a positive manner. So the previous set of images we've seen are the greats. They're great people. But here we have something called legends, or what I call asatir in Arabic. And this is inspired by the horrendous characters of folklore in the Middle East. So basically, in a very long time ago, there was these stories that parents would make up as to convince their children not to leave the houses because it's dangerous outside, whether it was the heat, whether it was creeps around, I don't know. But I remember those stories being told to me after the fact. I didn't live with these stories, but they're always referenced, you look like that person, or you remind me of that, So I started to dig deeper into these, and I found a lot of stories. Of course, these are fictional characters, but they're not visualized. And I thought it would be amazing if I get to visualize them. But how do I make them not bad, Normally
Yeah,
we
playful. How do you make them playful?
Yeah, normally we kind of, if you watch cartoons, some people root for the bad guys. If you watch Star Wars, you might lean into the bad guys. They might have cooler looking armor or suits or whatever, and that kind of engages you. Sort of like the misfits. You can make misfits look good, basically, and they're just different. So anyhow, so I loved, back then I loved action figures when I was a child. So I thought, what if I brought these villains looking like these action figures? And this pretty much has to do with what you said earlier, Mikey. It has to do with the generation I grew up with. So I was exposed to, let's call them toys, not action figures for a fact.
They're GI Joes, basically.
Yeah, I combined both concepts together, and what we have is something that is digestible. So when you look at it, if you were scared off by a child, that here's your villain. You can buy it off as an action figure, of course, figuratively here. And I had these little things that make them funny. Like the tantal is a word that we use for someone who is tall, but when I looked into it, it's actually derived from folklore, from a very tall, ugly man that roamed the dark streets, and he would steal off children. Scary stuff, and I wouldn't know why people would come up with such stories, but I made them funny, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I also want to talk about another one of the projects. This is Palestine.
Yes.
And I want to just ask you a question, since I'm not an illustrator. When I looked at the sort of the brief about this project, walk me through why these images are useful. Like, what am I looking at right here? Like, when you see this thing, what is the point of having this on your website?
I appreciate the process, and I know a select few do, because when I showcase these to, if you publish sort of the process of your work on your website or social media, it gives more value to what it is. It shows the thinking process. It shows that you are thinking beyond something that just looks good. And I've had, in this particular slide you're showcasing right now, a lot of people shared that one just for their fascination that, oh, you can actually read out the word. So I like to showcase the process. I put a lot of work into it. I don't always share the process because it's too long, and I like to basically make it digestible.
Yeah.
But
so
I think it's
for
important.
those who can't see this, right? You have the sort of the skyline of the buildings spell out Palestine.
Yes.
And each sort of building is each one of the letters.
Yes.
Yeah, beautifully done. Really, really,
Thank you.
really, really beautifully done.
A lot of research went into this because these are not random buildings. For instance, letter Fa, which is the first letter here, is the entrance to Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the bird you see flying, this basically the dot that goes over the letter. This is in Arabic punctuation, let's call it. And this is a bird that is indigenous to Palestine. The children sitting on peacefully, I would say, on the wall here creates this letter S in English, or seen in Arabic. And it goes further on. I try to incorporate different cultures, different sort of things, but essentially what I wanted to deliver with this is, I'm not going to attack anyone, but I'm just going to state a fact. And that's what I like to do with my art. I put it out there. I want to convey meaning. I'm not destroying someone's flag or anything doing like that. Not saying you should or shouldn't. Everyone has their own way of doing things and expressing their own views. But I like to approach this in a different manner. And this is probably one of my most shared artworks to date. Like, people would recognize artwork, but not recognize who made it. And this also goes to the fact when this came out last year, and I've also provided this artwork for free. So if you want, you can go on my website, print this out in whatever size you want. And if you want it to be customized for a space, I can do that for you as well. I don't get anything out of this. I just wanted to send over a message.
Amazing. I want to talk a little bit about your style and how it's changed over time. How do you think it's changed over time since, I mean, let's start with 2016. Mm-hmm. How do you think it's changed, and what have been the biggest influences for that change in the last 8 years, or 6 years?
So the most prominent thing across from 2016 till now is I share a common theme, which is I want to do things that have to do with the Arabic culture, full stop. However, I do expand on that. I do combine different cultures. Like, I have this sort of robot that looks like Japanese, but with an Arabic culture look. This goes back to, the shows you were talking about. So they've had an effect. But the idea is at its core, Arabic. The styles, I'm a person that likes to explore. I do not like something that is called a comfort zone, where basically, oh, I'm doing good at this style, let me stick to it and keep going and keep going. Eventually, you'll find yourself fatigued and you're just trying to please others. They like this art, you have to give them what they want. But it's not about that. I like to improve. In every artwork that I put out, I like to introduce something new, whether it was how I color things, the philosophy of the idea, or the art style. I would change things up from something that is completely refined with hard edges to something that is more brush-like and flowy. And I continue on exploring, leading me to also getting into the 3D space. I'm not really a 3D modeler or by any chance, but I've been training and I've been teaching myself. And like the NFT collection, I've created entirely in 3D. So this is something that I always like to do. I challenge myself. I want to do something different. And what people are mostly afraid of, if you change what you draw or how you draw, it might change the perception of what you do. But in my case, it does not. Whenever you look at any of my artworks, you sort of can tell there's sort of this, who made this sort of way. They share a color palette, for instance, or the way that I think is shared across these. So there's always this connectivity between all these styles. So I like change, essentially what I'm trying to say.
So cool. Okay, I want to do the quick Q&A, then we're going to take a couple questions from the audience. The first one is, what are you reading or watching right now?
Not much of a reader, sadly, but I am watching a show called Tokyo Vice. Amazing show. There are only 3 episodes out right now. It's a sort of show that is very cinematic, and I like. It takes place in the 90s in Japan, and it's about this American writer writing about what do you call them? The mafias of Japan. I forgot the name. The Yakuza. Yeah, the Yakuza.
Okay.
So
Cool.
that is a fascinating topic for me.
Amazing. Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
How far back can we go?
As far as you want.
Well, I'd say the Prophet, peace upon him. It would be an interesting thing, of course. There's a lot we can learn. So yeah.
Cool. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
I think it's the older generation that thinks that my art is generated by a computer. I brought that point on earlier.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is slowly fading away, where people are starting to see that, much like when you hold a brush on a canvas, if you hold a pen on an iPad or a mouse and keyboard on a computer, then that's the same.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Whose work do you admire or are inspired by?
I don't like to put one artist as something or person that I see in terms of what they do as entirely. I enjoy tidbits of every artist. I think I can learn from every artist out there. Sometimes I would look at a particular artist. They have an amazing color style I can learn from. Another one creates amazing characters. So yeah, I like to look at all these different artists equally.
Okay, great. Okay, Selma, you're up first.
Well, thank you. First, I want to ask basically what keeps you motivated? As artists, we all have this kind of low point when we're creating our art, and we just need to have something to keep us up. So what's that for you? And my other question is, what's some piece of advice or a lesson that you learned that sort of shifted, let's say, the way you think or the way you create your art? I feel like every artist always has that bit. So I'm just curious.
Yes. Great question, Salma. Thank you. I think that the two questions are interconnected. So the reasoning for number two question is why I do what I do in number one. So normally, for every artist, we'll find ourselves doing the same thing over and over again. And this sort of creates a fatigue where, what am I doing now? It's the same thing. I'm not learning anything new. Or we get into the spiral of comparison between other artists. You will never be that person. Is he better or is she better than me? And this is something I have been guilty of in the past, but overcame this a long time ago, where I only focus on what I do. I try to learn from others, but it is not my mission to try and compete with everyone. Everyone is basically in their own space. So don't try to compete with others, I would say, Selma. Try to create only when you are able to create and want to create. Don't be pushed to create because you have a social media and the algorithm forces you to keep posting so you keep being relevant. I can go for weeks or months of not putting anything. And frankly, I don't care, because what I care about is that I want to create something when the time is right. If I push myself, and this is when it comes to personal work, by the way, this is not client work. And if I push myself in personal work, I'll end up, it will show in the work itself. So going back to the point number two, I like change as well. So I don't put myself in this sort of loop where I keep creating the same thing just because people liked it. Think of it like when people make a movie, a really great movie, and it ends at the end of the movie. The story just ends, and they start making another movie based on that. So it's a sequel, but it doesn't work. It's always going to fail because you concluded the story in the first one. So I don't try to do the same thing over and over again. I like to do things differently every time. And this keeps my interest going.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Ahmed, I'm going to ask you a final question before we wrap up. What are you working on these days that you're excited about?
So the NFT collection is still an ongoing thing I'm working on. There are many projects that I have. So basically, whenever an idea pops, I open up the Notes app on my phone. I just write down ideas, and there are ideas from years back that I haven't gotten the chance to draw. But yeah, I'm working on a few personal projects of mine. More or less the Arabic culture, but something completely, hopefully different in terms of the art style and how I execute it.
Great. My last question. What does OwaikeO mean?
Back in 2004, I bought an Xbox. I used to be an Xbox one. Now I'm a PC guy. I went online for the first time playing video games. I had to come up with a name. Sadly, there were a lot of racist people back then, so you'd avoid anything Arabic. So I started writing O, then W, then it just came up. So it kind of stuck with me. I wanted the word.
Wait, so are you telling me OwaikeO is a random set of letters that you used to hide the fact that you are Arab?
It started off like this. Had I had the chance now to change, I would have, but people know the name now. But yeah, there's a lot of racism back then in terms of online. You'd automatically be labeled a terrorist as soon as you enter. I was playing kind of like a robot versus robot game, and people were accusing me that I would use that for terrorism. Like, I don't even have a robot. But how? I mean, maybe that's a topic for another day. But yeah, quite interesting.
Okay. This is the equivalent of Childish Gambino being created through a Wu-Tang name generator. So random name generator. Well, Ahmed, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you so much.
I'm a big fan of your work, so I'm happy that we got a chance to talk.
Thank you for having me. It has been an awesome conversation, and thank you for putting this together. And for everyone of our listeners today, and hopefully the podcast. Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody, have a good day or night wherever you are. And this will go up on the podcast tomorrow. Bye, everybody.